turning a staff into a snake, turning the water of the Nile into blood, causing frogs to emerge from the Nile. These are all signs and wonders with which God provided Moshe and Aaron to perform before Paro. Of course, the magicians of Paro were able to replicate them, and one wonders why it is that God asked Moshe and Aaron to do signs and wonders that God surely knew Paro's magicians could do exactly the same thing. Wouldn't that only further entrench and embolden Paro? Wouldn't it be counterproductive to the mission of trying to bring the Jewish people out of the land of Egypt? The Midrash actually asks the same question in a very, very colorful way. The Midrash paints a picture in which, after Moshe and Aaron perform these signs, Paro literally calls 5-year-old children out of school in order to perform the exact same signs. And then he asks his wife, Mrs. Paro, and she's able to do them too. And Paro says to Moshe and Aaron, I don't know why you're bringing magic to Egypt. It's like bringing coals to Newcastle, or in the words of the Midrash, like bringing fish to Akko. So we really must ask ourselves, why does God set up Moshe and Aaron for this apparent embarrassment, even humiliation? Why equip them with signs and wonders that the magicians can perform, which would seem so counterproductive to the larger mission of the Exodus? I'd like to address this question through an interpretation of Ramban, of the comments of the magicians the first time they fail, that is, at the plague of lice, when they are unable to produce lice, and they say to Paro, Etzba Elohimhi, this is the finger of God. What do the magicians mean when they say Etzba Elohimhi? Well, for starters, even Ezra contends that they are not saying to Paro that God, capital G, is at work. Rather, they are saying that these lice are what our insurance companies would call an act of God, meaning it's a natural occurrence. Moshe and Aaron just got lucky in being able to predict when these lice would come, but there's really nothing to worry about here. Ramban, however, interprets the comment, Etzba Elohimi, it is the finger of God, in a different way. And his interpretation, ultimately, I think, provides insight as to why God set the whole drama up in this way, specifically allowing the magicians to succeed not once but 3 times at the beginning of the story. Let me couch Ramban's comment in a larger frame, which I think will help us to understand the true significance of what he is saying. We already know from the beginning of the story that Paro doesn't react well to a direct challenge to his power and authority. When Moshe first confronts Paro, he reacts by asking the Israelites to make the same number of bricks, but this time without straw. In other words, Paro responds to a direct challenge to his power and authority by inflicting even more pain, by acting in an even more callous way. And so, God decides to choose a different path at first, a path that will involve building up a voice within the palace, namely the voice of the magicians, who will be a trusted and loyal voice, a voice that Paro will look to for guidance as this crisis with the Israelite slaves and with their leadership as this crisis deepens. And ultimately, these very voices that God will have elevated and strengthened and given credibility to in Paro's eyes will be the ones that will open for him an opportunity to chart a different course. Here's how it works. The magicians are successful with the turning of staffs into snakes. They are successful with the plague of blood. They are successful with the plague of frogs. And now, as Ramban understands it, they are unable to produce the lice. And what they say to Paro is, Etzma Elohim he, it is the finger of God, capital G God, the way that Ramban understands the magician's comment. However, it is merely a finger. In other words, the magicians say to Paro, there isn't all that much to be worried here. This is not a very powerful God. It's a God who is capable of a finger's worth of damage, not a God who can ultimately defeat you. However, the magicians, even as they try to minimize what is going on, they do open a window for Paro. They do allow him to catch a glimpse of what the future might hold. Moshe and Aharon are not mere magicians. There is a God. There is a God for whom they speak. There is a God who is interested in the Israelites going free. And although so far you've only seen a fingerful, you don't really know what might come next. You see what God has done here? God has deliberately created for Paro voices whom he trusts, who are now telling him, if he chooses to listen carefully, that there may be some danger in the future. And here, Paro has the opportunity to look into that future, not yet having been defeated, not yet having been forced to surrender, not yet having been humiliated or brought to his knees, still very much standing upright with his reputation and with his dignity still intact in the eyes of his people. But to say, looking into the future, looking through this window that this plague of lice and the comment of my own magicians has revealed. I have the opportunity to change course. I have the opportunity to act with wisdom. I have the opportunity to figure out how to resolve this problem without having to face the ignominy of humiliation or the pain of defeat. There's something important to be learned here, and that is that when we have in our own lives someone who, for reasons of ego or reasons of fear or through denial of truth, have taken up what is simply an indefensible position, have begun to walk down a potentially disastrous path. It's so very easy to think that the proper way to respond is through scolding or humiliating or in one way or another threatening force to compel that person away from that path. But what God is teaching us here in the way that He sets up this entire story at the beginning of the Exodus journey, is that it's always worth it to at least give it a shot. See if you can be a trusted voice, a genuine voice, a loyal voice, who doesn't threaten force, who doesn't humiliate or scold, but who tries to open up a window so that your loved one, your friend, your spouse, your child can catch a glimpse into the future. What this all might look like if you keep going down this path. And might not it be better to take this moment when disaster has not yet engulfed you, when you're still standing on your feet, when you haven't been defeated by your own intransigence and mistaken path, to look into that future and to chart a different course. The trusted voice, the genuine voice, can so often be more powerful than any threat of consequences that might ensue. It doesn't work all the time. And clearly, it didn't work in Pablo's case either. But there are other examples in Tanakh where it does. Think about Tamar and the way she spoke to Yehuda. We think about Abigail and the way she spoke to David. You can think even about the prophet Yonah and the way he spoke to the king of Nineveh. There are times that giving someone a glimpse into the future can be so much more persuasive than a threat, than a confrontation, than desiring to act with force to compel someone to change their course. It's not an easy thing to do. It requires patience, it requires faith. But the lesson of our story and the reason that God gives Moshe and Aharon signs and wonders that God knows the magicians will be able to reproduce is that God wants to teach us that this is always worth the effort to be a voice of genuineness, to be a voice that is trusted, that gives a glimpse into the future, that enables the possibility of a wise decision prior to a terrible confrontation that ends in defeat needing to occur. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and enjoy Parshat Va'era.